Well, welcome to Prospecting for Gold. We've got another great installment for you lined up. We got George Buzzard Massie, and he's going to be looking for that yellow metal gold going back into an old placer cave. And it's going to be an interesting one. So without further ado, here he is, the old Buzzard.
Okay, I want to let you know what's going on here. I've hiked down into this area and I'm doing a little prospecting today. You know, I may set up a high banker, I might do some gold dredging, I might do a little hydraulic, and I don't know yet, but what I'm doing is a little prospecting. And it's always good to do some prospecting. Now, I've walked way down in here into this river, and I'm going to tell you something about where this is at. You know, the mining guide for GPAA has got a lot of places listed in it. And we're in California. I'm going to leave it up to you to find it in the mining guide. But we're in Northern California, and we're down on the river doing a little testing around and a little walking, you know, here and there, and checking everything out. And I found these old caves up just not too far back up from the river, but in the brush. And normally it's all grown in, but I was able to find them back up here, and I'm going to go in and take a look. And there's some really interesting things. We're going to see if we can find a little gravel in it to dump something in our bucket and carry it down to the stream and pan it out. And what we're doing is we're prospecting the whole area. So we've taken a nice day here and hiked in. It's quite a hike to get down in here. And before I decide whether I'm going to bring a dredge in, I'm going to have to do a few things. I'm going to have to check the book, you know, the mining guide, find out if dredging season's open and what the permits are like. Usually they're real simple to fill out, and all of that's in the book. So these are some of the things that we're talking about. But I got in the pickup this morning, drove up here and hiked down into this place and did a couple of samples over there by the creek, a couple of panning. Then I got back up here in the brush and I found this cave. We're going to go in and take a look. And one of the interesting things that I found about this area, this cave, is first of all, this whole area was mined back in the 1850s and 60s, again during the 1930s. And you know, ladies and gentlemen, there was twice as much gold taken out of California during the 1930 Depression years as there was during the 1850 gold rush days. A lot of people don't know that, and there's a lot of gold left out there. And chances are in that mining guide there's something close to you. But let's take a look here. You'll see that there's quartz veins running through this old limestone. And these limestone formations that have pitched in here, I got the hunch that this is probably, and from the history of the area, shows that these limestone intrusions were pushed up here, and they're all hollowed out here from water and other kind of erosion, and they've created these kind of caves back in here. And so what I think that's happened is that when the earth kind of pitched this stuff up, this was the bottom of an old ancient river, maybe an ancient tertiary river stream, and then as it changed and this new river come in, it's washed this stuff out, and if we're lucky it'll have concentrated some of it down in the bottom. But these quartz veins within this limestone is really interesting. Let's take a look over here. I'll show you some other stuff. It looked like the old timers dug in here some too, because here's some old timbers back over here. We got some timbers. These are sawed timbers. Now, I don't know whether that they left these timbers in here just to keep them in out of the weather and keep them dry, and they were using them in here or what, but they could have been keeping them in here for firewood or whatever. But there's evidence of a lot of diggings here, very old diggings from back in the 50s. Let me, or back in the 1850s. Let me pump my lantern up here. I carried that over in the bucket, and I'll pump that lantern up, and we're going to go back in the back of this this old cave here, and I've found some stuff back in there that might prove to be real interesting for gold. You know, gold is like a bear; it's where you find it. And I want you to remember that when you go back in these places, be real careful. Take somebody with you, and they're dangerous. And I don't recommend that you go in a place like this at all. We do it. We make it look pretty simple on the GPAA program, but you want to be really careful when you do this kind of stuff if you're out there. Now we're going to go back and take a look. Let me just take my shovel with me as we go back in, and we'll take a look at that material, because if we can find some river washed gravel back in this old mine, this could be really something, because it looks like to me that this was a natural mine, and probably what they did is they followed the quartz vein in as they went in through this limestone, and they mined it out and brought it out. And also they might have been mining the gravel. You know, you never know. Sometimes back in these old mines, sometimes what they did is that they worked out the placer gravel that was laying right in this would be just tight full of gravel, because this was the bottom of an old river channel at one time. And so they might have mined the placer gravel out of here, and that's what they were following. Or they could have been following one of those quartz veins. But we're going to go back in, take a look, me and you, and see what we can find back in here. Okay, now we're going to go back in this old cave. You see all this limestone down here, and I got a suspicion that what they did is that they worked the placer out. Now, I don't know if there were any Chinese in this country, but you see, we got a lot of river rock back in here, and looks like an old hose running in there. And we're just going to ease our way back on in here now and get clear back to the back and go down to the bottom and see if we can get us a little sample, and maybe we'll get some gold out of it. That's what we're after, isn't it? Okay, now we're going to just ease back in here. A lot of guys ask me, they say, Buzzard, you got any ideas on why they would quit mining in an area if there's still gold back there? Let's just set our lantern down here, because it gets pretty tight on back in there. We'll get our bucket down here. And boy, this is some good looking material right here. Got a lot of river gravel in it, you know, and we're just a lot of sand. Hey, that's some real good looking stuff. And I'm gonna take me a sample right here in my bucket. There's a nice river rock right there. But they say, why would they stop if there's still material left there that buries gold? Why would they stop? Who knows? There's a variety of reasons why the old timers quit. Let's go ahead and collect us up some samples here. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time back in here, but there's a lot of reasons why the old timers quit. You know, they might have found something better. You know, that's human nature. The grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. And maybe it's not quite as rich, you know. Maybe some of the color played out back here for them. Maybe they weren't getting as good a gold here as they were getting out front or someplace else. And maybe they decided, well, they've gone far enough. Or maybe they got rich, you know. Maybe they made their pile and quit. They're not a whole lot different than we are today. They might have just decided to retire. And we're going to get us a lot of this good material down in here. I got some good gravel in here, you know, that I'm breaking up, and they might have made their pile. They might have retired from it. You know, maybe the old guy that owned the claim, you know, maybe he died. You know, a lot of miners pass on. Maybe he went back east or something, or come down with the colic, and you know, nobody else could come in and work his mine. And so maybe that's the reason he quit. Or, you know, like a lot of them, you know, they quit during the 40s. Because gold was made a non-essential industry, and a lot of the old mines were shut down. And so that could have been the reason. But you can see we still got some material here that is unworked. It gets tight back up in there. And from what I see here, looking at this old cave, and I don't know if you ever get out on this claim or this property, by golly, I wouldn't come back in here. Wouldn't recommend that unless you got some people with you and know what you're doing. But if you do come back in here, what I suspicion this is, after seeing it, is that it was a gravel mine. In other words, what that means is a placer mine. The gravel was stuck within the bedrock, and this is bedrock certainly, but it's all pitched up sideways, and the gravel was stuck in here. And what I think happened is when the new river cut its channel out there, it probably washed some of this out, and then the old timers found it, and they just followed it right back in. And of course they didn't get it all. It goes on, and like placer mining, any kind of mining is just a matter of inches. The guys up at the 16-to-1 mine, they're taking metal detectors and going over these old walls, and they're finding those quartz veins. What a guy could do with a metal detector in here is he could go over this floor, and I may bring one back with me, get me one of them Fisher gold bugs or that Garrett Stinger, and bring it back in here and look for those nuggets, because you could go over this and maybe the stuff that's concentrated down on the floor here, you could find it. I got a suspicion that if we get serious about working back in here, we're going to have to go down 3 or 4 feet to really get into the good gold. But let's take this sample out and see if they left any at all. We'll pan this out down there at the creek or the river, and we'll see if there's any gold in it. And if there is, well, then we'll know another place where there's a little gold that's been left by the old timers, because there's a lot of it left. And really some interesting geology when you figure that all the underground mines, they weren't all hard rock mines. A lot of them were placer mines that they were working underground. So let's just ease on out of here. Well, you know, it's just amazing how these guys went in and worked this placer gravel, and we're easing out of here. You know, we're having a lot of fun with this Gold Prospector show. We're not TV people, and it's sure hard on some of these old boys coming in with us doing this prospecting and mining. Well, we got us a sample, and we got out of the mine there okay. I'm going to shut my lantern off, and we'll go down to the creek and we'll pan this stuff out, take a look at it and see what kind of a sample we got in there. Well, maybe we can determine what the old timers is doing, whether they were getting any gold or what was going on with them. These Coleman lanterns are pretty nice. They're not the kind I recommend, though, if you're going back in the mine. I just happen to have that one behind the seat of my pickup truck, and when I found this old cave down here, I decided, well, I'm going to go get it and take a look back in there, and it served its purpose. So let's go down to the creek and pan this stuff out and see what we got. Okay, we're going to find us some quiet water down here by the stream and pan us out a little bit of this stuff out of our bucket. Let me set the gold pan down here, and well, let's just dump a little bit of that in there. I don't need that shovel. We'll pan a little bit of this out, see what we got in it, huh? Set the bucket over here so I can sit down on it. You know, I was telling you that that gold mining, it's a dirty business. No, it's a fun business. I was telling you that it's a game of inches. A couple of friends of mine was up in Alaska last year, and good dredgers, you know. These guys are real good. Let me just talk to you a little bit about what we're doing here. We're washing off the rocks. That's a nice river rock that we found up in that old cave. And a lot of old moss and stuff growing back in there. We're just washing that down. But anyway, these two guys, old Frank and Jim, they were up there dredging. They run out of gold with their dredge, so they shut it off, and they left their dredge there in camp. They took off upstream, you know, and was up there, carried the dredge in all the way upstream, about 2 miles. They were up there dredging. Some other people come into camp, and they didn't know that Jim and Frank had run out of gold with their dredge, so they fired that dredge up and started working with it, because it was a club dredge, and they got 5 ounces the next day. Well, you should have seen Frank and Jim, but that's kind of shows you what mining is. You know, you can go along for 2 or 3 days and not get any gold, and then by golly, you can come up and get a whole bunch. Oh, I see some color in this pan already. God, you know, I tell you, there isn't nothing in the world greater than getting out here in the stream by yourself and God's living room and panning for gold. And you do a little panning, you come up with some little nugget of gold. Look at them nuggets showing up there. Oh man, isn't that nice in that black sand? And I tell you, I can sit here and pan all day with this. Oh, we got some rich ground up there. God, I never get over being excited. Look at the gold in here. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Look at this. Let's take her up here now and take a real good fanning or tailing action on it. Take a look at what we got in the pan. There's some nice little nuggets there. Yeah, we got 2 or 3 nice little pieces here, and well, there's 1, 2, 4, and then there's a whole bunch of fines. So we got some good dirt up there in that mine. I'm going to go back up there and maybe dig me out a couple of 3 buckets and haul them down and run them through a sluice box, and I'll get them full this time. You know, ladies and gentlemen, if you're thinking about getting started in prospecting, a guy asked me one day, he said, George, he said, do you guys always find the gold that you show on the show? And yes, we do. But some things that you don't see is sometimes we work a little bit longer at it than what you see us here on the show. In this particular instance, though, the gold is up there in that cave, and I didn't expect to find that much. I expected to find a flake or 2 because I'd taken a pan up there before we started shooting, but I'll tell you, that's really some nice stuff. And anytime you find a little flake of gold like that, you're out all by yourself. There isn't nothing in the world like that. That's the greatest hobby that God ever created for man. There's gold all over. Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas, not too much in Kentucky, California. And you know, I'll tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, we owe those old 49ers that came to California and those gold rushes a debt of gratitude, because the entrepreneurial spirit that was born in America, part of that makes up the personality of this great country of ours, was born during that great gold rush out west. And there was many of them. There was about 1,000 gold rushes that started out in North Carolina and then to North Georgia and all the way to the Bering Sea and Nome, Alaska.
Well, the Buzzard proved that there's still gold out there. The old timers didn't get it all, and with price of gold today, there's kind of a gold rush going on right now, and gold prices are up, and the Buzzard's going to be touring us through the old history of the gold rush when we come back after the commercial break, so stick around.
Here you've got the assay office. Now, an assay office was usually the first building that was put up in any of the towns. And you know, the gold miners were great for going out west and settling, and most of the towns that we have in the western United States were settled by prospectors, and the assay office was the first place that they would do. That also served as a stage stop and a community hall and a bank. The advertisements, most of the guys got out west. They went around the Horn on sailing ships, and they come into San Francisco, and from there they spread out up and down the 300 miles, the mother lode, and later on to up into Oregon and out to Arizona. And they had every kind of contraption. This was Rufus Porter's flying machine. This was a cartoon depicting that in 1850, where the guy would take a rubber band and stretch it all the way to California and simply cut the rubber band and sling all the Argonauts clear to San Francisco Bay. When they got to San Francisco Bay, a lot of these old sailing ships were abandoned. Their crews would take off and go up into the mother lode as well, because they could make a lot more money digging for gold than they could working as a sailor on a ship. The average guy would get anywhere from a ½ ounce to an ounce. As a matter of fact, it was said about Pine Log, a community much as you see here down in the canyon on one of the rivers throughout the mother lode, that the miners would get as much as 1 ounce to 2 ounces a day per man. And at tin cup diggings in California, they'd work all day to fill up their tin cups. So wages were tremendous in the mother lode of California. They weren't getting rich, but they were certainly making real good wages. Some did get rich, and here in one of the famous paintings from the early days in California, you see the young industrious miner that the people that followed him along had the sporting class, you might say, and they would get him drunk and take his gold off of him and some horse bets on horse races or something like that. And so many got a lot of gold, and many of them lost it. But most of your miners were good, honest, God-fearing men that left their farm in Illinois or someplace to go out west because there was no work. The United States was basically an agricultural country at that time. It wasn't always the industrialized nation that we see today. but much of the capital to build this industrialized nation was dug out of the ground by men like the ones that you just saw there. Then, of course, when the railroad stretched across the prairies, it brought in hundreds of thousands of new gold miners to rush to all of the different cities, from Helena, Montana to Prescott, Arizona, into Nevada. And it made travel across the prairies easy and cheap. And here you see some of the miners with their burro in Arizona around Tombstone, and many of the guys would travel from one gold rush to another because there were literally thousands of rushes to all these different areas. Wyatt Earp made it to Tombstone as a marshal, and he traveled there because of the gold rush, and later on he wound up in Nome, Alaska in 1900, and I think even in the movies later on. And they built towns and cities, and the towns that they built were thrown up overnight, but many of them have lasted today. Sacramento, California, Helena, Montana, Prescott, many of these cities were built on gold, and were built on the sweat of the miners that you see here. And today, a guy can take a sluice box and go right back into the old diggings, and he can come up with pretty good gold if he knows what he's doing.
Well, thanks for tuning in today, folks. Hope you learned something. Maybe you can get the gold fever and go out there and strike it rich. And the Buzzard's going to be bringing you more of his stuff. We got a lot more good, informative, educational, and entertaining things to come. So tune right back in here for some more gold prospecting.